Finally, we got it growing. That's
Okay,
really good. Welcome to, this is part of public access, an important movement of communications in the country. We could talk about that on another occasion. We were chatting, but I'm really happy to welcome to this program. Looking forward to talking, and welcome in the audience. The guest for this program is Sheila Michaels, and Sheila Michaels is billed as a, well, she was a very early, how we worded, in the southern part of the country, civil rights activist in the South in the early days of that.
Early 60s.
Early 60s, which was early in terms
early.
of the national movement. And she's also a biblical scholar, and she's also, what else have we got you billed as?
I do oral histories, but I don't think we talked about that.
Oral histories.
Oral histories and civil rights people and peace people.
But she's got a very interesting story to tell, and I'm really happy to have you here, and welcome very much to
Glad to be here, thank you.
Share with us, if you would, your, we weighed in, your background, born and raised, education, and then we can get talking about things in terms of your development.
So I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was raised there and part of the time in the Bronx, too, with my grandparents during the war. My mother and stepfather were traveling all the time, and so I stayed with my grandparents.
I don't mean to pry. Why were they traveling?
Oh, he was in war work. He was a metallurgical engineer.
Right. Okay.
And so he had to. By the time he married my mother, they were dismantling the foundries.
Yeah.
And so he had to get. You know, he
move
traveled
to another place. Yeah.
Well, no, he went from foundry to foundry, gearing them up for peacetime work.
Yeah, it was a big transition.
Oh,
Everything.
it was.
I can remember rationing. Are you old enough to remember rationing?
Oh, yeah.
The A card on the card, and
I remember.
Nobody had butter, and
my grandmother crying because she wanted more shoes for me, and the whole family was selfish because they weren't giving her their coupons. Yeah, I remember.
That was an amazing time. I was born in '35, so I was 10 when the war ended. I can remember vaguely VE Day, VJ Day, and that kind of stuff.
That was my birthday.
Was it really?
Yeah, my
VJ
6th birthday was VE Day.
Oh boy, that was a big.
I was in Seattle, near Seattle. Yeah.
Anyway, but the thing is, the nation was totally. I would say that was probably the last time, really, that the nation was totally behind a war effort. Everybody was signed on to that full tilt boogie. You know, Rosie the Riveter. Everybody was pulling together here and in England also. You know, and I think it's not been the same since. Korea was a little dicey. And Vietnam became a quagmire for us, you know, and that kind of thing. But anyway, that was part of our early upbringing, and that. And then you came to the Bronx, you say, with
Came to the Bronx with my grandparents and lived with them for about 5 years.
You would have been relatively young then?
Oh, yes, I was 3.
3? Oh, I see.
And until I was 8.
Yeah, okay.
And then we went back to St. Louis. And I grew up there.
In St. Louis?
In St. Louis.
Not Florissant or in St. Louis proper?
Florissant, no. As a matter of fact, my old roommate was in an not an orphanage. Nuns raised her in Florissant, but I mean, she went away to school.
I only remember that's where my sister ended up. She was in Florissant and St. Louis. And I taught for a year across the river from St. Louis at Edwardsville. It was across the river, East St. Louis.
St. Louis, Southern Illinois University?
That's right. That was the same university Buckminster Fuller was down at Carbondale in the southern part of Illinois.
And Harold Gibbons was very instrumental in, and the Teamsters were very instrumental in setting up Edwardsville because Carbondale was too far for people who wanted to further their education to go.
Yeah.
And it's actually fairly important in labor history.
Yeah.
And,
oh, really? Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. I have a granddaddy who was in labor. I'm from Detroit.
My mother was in labor too.
No, yes, good job. Well done. Well done. You should be doing shtick. Yeah, you're really a sharp mind and everything. No, but he was I have a grandfather who was Otto Sprunk. He was East Prussian. That's why I think I have high cheekbones. I think it was Genghis Khan has got in on the genetic pool or something. I'm not sure.
He got in on everybody's genetic pool.
He sure got around. But anyway, he was a lithographer, and they didn't have labor. That's turn of the 19th, 20th century. They didn't really have the industrial unions or anything like that. It was a guild, and it was for skilled
Yeah, AFL
labor, you know, and he was there. But I was also drug up, as they say in Detroit, and we had the experience with the CIO, I mean, the, you know, auto workers and Ruther and all that, and it was a very volatile time. There was a lot of violence and everything attended upon the
I heard
development
about the Detroit riots from people I did oral histories with.
Oh, yeah, you do that oral history. We'll get to that. But you were doing that, and then what like, you went to school here in the Bronx or what?
No. Well, I started grade school here, and actually, I started kindergarten in St. Louis, and then I came here and finished, and then I started first grade in St. Louis, and then I came back to New York, and so, you know, I usually did about 2 or 3 schools a year by the time they'd work their way back from the coast and put me in school somewhere, and then the next place.
How do you think it suited you having those
moves
and shakes up?
I hated it
when you were young. I mean, because you usually get some friends. And
no, I never got any friends. That was the point.
No friends.
People picked on me.
Oh, I see. Well, okay. Well, then that's it, maybe. Okay. But you were there, and so you were in St. Louis. And so where did you go to, let's say, when you got to high school and university and everything?
I finished grade school in St. Louis, went to high school in St. Louis.
Right.
And Horton Watkins Consolidated at that point high. And then I went to William and Mary.
Okay.
And I went there for about 1.5 years, and then they threw me out on a trumped-up charge. It had to do with freedom of speech in the newspaper that I was working on, and I was the first person to overcut an 8 o'clock class, and out I went.
You were agitating. Were you one of them agitators?
I wasn't then.
I hope.
You weren't. No. I learned that you're going to get it in the neck no matter what.
Well, yeah, good. That's a lesson to learn. Yeah.
You know, at that point, I decided, you don't have to be so careful anymore, because even though I was one of a group, I mean, we wanted to not be censored, not so much for for a speech that wasn't decent. But,
no, political.
Politically.
Yes, right.
So I was part of the whole newsletter group, the newspaper group, and since I was the first one, I got it. But
and they actually expelled you?
They expelled me, yeah. Well, they suspended me for like a year, and went back. So I finished Columbia.
You finished Columbia in journalism? Or
well, Middle Eastern Studies, comparative literature.
Okay, the literature and that, and then because you're also a biblical scholar, we can get to that in the deal. Middle Eastern, okay. And you did Columbia, you took a degree there, a bachelor's degree?
Comparative literature.
In comparative literature.
As far as I got,
Okay, well, that's good. You got a wide range of things. And you were
mythology.
Mythology also.
Mythology, yeah.
Mr. Joseph Campbell.
Well, he and I are not, we don't see eye to eye.
You don't? That's interesting. We get into that because he was a major iconic figure and everything.
Yeah, he was Jungian, and I just don't think that you can classify people that way. And particularly, it's very discriminatory against women. I mean, women get to be hags, men get to be sages.
That's what we missed at the very beginning. You were the one who came up with making in the common language the honorific Ms.
Ms.
That's I knew there was something missing from the early introduction, and that's not a small matter. And it bespeaks the fact that you had interest in that kind of a thing there. So you did the literature, and then I don't mean to again pry, but what year did you finish up with that, and when did you? And we got you down as an early intervener,
I quit
as it
school
were, from the
a number
north.
of times.
Okay.
So not until the 80s.
Educating yourself all the time.
Yeah,
You got
I hope
intellectual
so.
curiosity all along, and still do. You're autodidactic, really. I
yeah.
think that's the only thing that really matters. If somebody is really interested in learning, there's all kinds of ways you can do it. And whether you took this particular class or that, if their curiosity is kept alive and they keep active, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And that is ultimately autodidact. That is, it's up to them to do it.
You have to be.
Yeah. And if you are, you're okay, and you don't have to have gone to school A, B, or C or anything.
Don't.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Think of how educated people were before there were colleges.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Read
That's
Montaigne.
Right.
He didn't go to college.
Right. That's right. And I think it's trending that way. I really do. I think I noticed all of the major professors or lecturers at our major Harvard and all the major schools. There's now a thing where their top lecturers are now putting their lectures on the internet for free to anybody who wants to see it.
Yeah.
And I think it's going in that direction. And that going to the university is mostly about social networking with the people that are from the upper echelons who are going to be movers and shakers and decision makers that you want to be in touch with to build a career.
One of the things
that's all that education is about. And to reify the class structure of our society.
One of the things that they're doing, though, with education is that they're not giving anybody tenure anymore. And so they're hiring only adjuncts at $2,000 a course.
Yeah, that's the way to get cheap
And nobody
labor.
can make a living like this anymore.
Well, they still give tenure. They're still tenured. They're tenured professors.
Very few. I think that St. Louis University, when it wanted to upgrade a lot of its departments, they started opening tenured courses, and everybody was like, oh my God, you know, tenured, they're giving tenure. You know, and people were kind of racing to be part of St. Louis University, which had been, you know, and it's got the Vatican.
Yeah, right.
It's got the Vatican's files.
But they've traditionally had that tenure in order to give supposedly the independent scholar leeway from the political influence, because they might have and so they make it open for controversial issues to be able to be investigated in the name of freedom of investigation.
But there are very few tenure track positions open anymore.
Is that true? They have statistics on that? Because I used to be a professor, and everybody had tenure, which is everybody got tenure. No. My daughter got tenure.
They're
She's
hiring
tenured.
Adjuncts now.
Oh, well, they do that a lot, and then they also use the graduate assistants. Were you ever a graduate assistant?
No.
That's another group of slave class people where you're getting, it's like an indentured thing where you teach. But then it's economics, and now so that's a whole other issue about the structure of education in the future.
Education.
I think it's all going to be on the internet. Everything's going to be available to people, and that social interaction is just about making a good Rolodex. So you get investment banking, Sam's over here, you buy him a $3,000 bottle of wine and you get the contract and all that kind of thing. That's all it's about. And the actual decision-making, financial decision-making is going to be done by algorithms within the computer. So, I mean, we got big problems in any way. But back to the running life of Sheila Michaels. You got out, and then you were out, you did that. When did you get interested in, let's talk first about, chronologically, which was first? Did you make the venture or pay attention to civil rights issues early on, or did you get the honorific of Ms. first? Let's talk about the civil rights first. I think that was earlier. Was
first.
Right? And you were concerned about that right from the get-go as a young woman and everything?
As soon as I realized that we were going to segregated schools, I hadn't realized it until about fourth grade.
Fourth grade.
Fourth
okay,
grade.
Good for you.
Because in the Bronx, of course, we weren't segregated. We were integrated.
Okay.
And then I hadn't realized that there were no black or brown people.
You're only about 9 years old.
Yeah.
Fourth grade.
Yeah.
You're young, but you were conscious of that.
Well, we were climbing over this trestle. As my friend got me to climb over a trestle.
Yeah.
On the way to the kiddie show.
Yeah.
And she said, "There's the school."
Yeah.
And I hadn't realized that. In the first place, the word shocked me, and in the second place,
what word?
It was the word for a person of the black persuasion.
Negro.
That
harder.
wasn't what she said.
You don't want to use the word.
No.
Oh, that's the N-word school. I see. Okay, yeah.
So that was when I realized that people were living apart. I mean, that when we took the laundry, you didn't have washing machines in the house then. When we took the laundry, we went up this road and we left it off, and it was usually at night, and I didn't get to see anything.
But it was Chinese, probably.
No, they were black.
Mostly it was the Chinese did that back in
St. Louis.
We used to have, in St. Louis you are. Okay, right,
okay.
right.
So that was
the border state.
So there was a community right next to ours that was up by the train track.
Right.
And there was a school there that wasn't our school.
Right.
Right, within walking distance of our school.
Right, yeah.
So that was when I first became aware that we were segregated. And of
course, we were living in an apartheid culture.
Yeah, but At the same time, I didn't know whether that was wrong or right, but I just
Well, you're
became
only
very
9, dear. You can't
uncomfortable.
take on the whole weight of
Well,
the world. Or were you thinking in those heavy kind of terms?
Well, it
then?
made me uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and
okay,
everybody
good.
always laid everything
Good.
on me anyway, so, you know,
Why
sure.
would they be doing that? Because
Oh,
you
I
were a
don't know.
rebel? Were you a rebel?
No,
Were you
no,
you weren't.
No, I was
Everybody
just the
lived.
kid that everybody picked on, as
Oh,
I
I
said.
see. Okay.
Yeah, I was a chubby kid and cried easily.
You
know,
were
yeah.
okay.
So, anyway, that was when I first, and then when I got to high school, I became an activist, and I was in the Human Rights Club, and I became president of the Human Rights Club.
Good for you.
And we integrated while I was there, and
The school did.
the school did.
Good, okay. And you helped instigate that
Yeah,
or support it,
yeah,
and everything. And that would have been about what years?
That was the year after, that was 55.
55, yeah, I remember.
55, I graduated in
Eisenhower.
57, so 56 was when we integrated.
Okay. And you were not just drifting along with the tumbling tumbleweeds. You were looking at such questions of social justice.
Right.
Yeah, and you were an activist-minded person then,
Right.
even in high school.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, good. Okay.
National Council of Christians and Jews, and
Good.
and,
CORE
and-
or
well, CORE,
NAACP or
CORE
any of the...
actually existed, but I didn't know about it at the time.
Right, okay.
Okay. And then when I came back from William and Mary, now while I was in William and Mary, they shut down the Prince Edward County schools. I think it was
Okay.
Prince Edward.
Okay.
But anyway, Prince something County
Right.
schools. And that was near us, and rather than integrate. So I was aware of that. And
Presaging Wallace at the door.
Oh,
Ms.
Wallace was later, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Horrible. I mean, it's hard to realize just how ingrained that was and how much we were, in fact, an apartheid nation.
Oh, we were.
And just living with it. It was Truman had integrated the military, I guess, finally.
I think it was part of the process. Bayard Rustin.
God bless him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Started he was really the mind behind the first March on Washington in 42 or 43.
That early?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it didn't take place.
Right.
Roosevelt signed the labor agreements that integrated the factories and everything, and said that they weren't going to give contracts unless there was, they were impartial in
Okay,
hiring.
I didn't know that. That's news to me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, right.
And then Rustin was also on the Fellowship of Reconciliation, first bus rides in the South, and that was in 47.
47 they were doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, see, this is really interesting. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So, and then they but in between was about the time that Truman signed the integration of the Army.
Yeah, right.
And that, that was because everybody everybody went into the Army.
Right.
That was actually a great equalizer.
I had to go in the Army. I was drafted.
Everybody was.
But I was drafted
Universal
during the
draft.
time of the Korea War.
Right.
But I was drafted into the Army. I hated it. I really didn't like the Army at all.
Oh, I don't
didn't
blame
fit.
you.
I really didn't fit at all, because they want you to do everything according to rules and stuff.
Yeah.
And, but anyway, But it was integrated, and I just assumed, it hardly occurred to me.
Well, you were from
I was
Detroit.
in Detroit and everything, and there were troubles there and everything, but there wasn't, it did occur, as an undergraduate, but it wasn't, you were committed early on, and you were into that, and cognizant of it, and actually taking action, and I take my hat off to you enormously.
Well, St. Louis was a segregated city, as I said.
St. Louis is still a funny place. It's border. Missouri's border.
I go there every year.
Oh,
I go
okay.
back.
I know.
Very fond of St. Louis.
No, I like St. Louis.
Yeah.
Meet Me in St. Louis is one of my favorite movies,
Okay.
and it's there and everything. And I did have a feeling for it. They got a big project coming at East St. Louis now. I hope it gets through to build the Old Man River project. It'll be a gigantic dome, and it's going to be a tribute to black music that's coming up the Mississippi. And it's a big project that a number of people are signing on to make a major institutional thing there for East St. Louis. East St. Louis, the poorest city in the country.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, where's the poorest? There's a lot of poor, but that's the poorest. And they're going to do this, a major project that should be supported by one and all.
It was really never a town that was settled. It was a town that the factories brought in people to work there. And it was founded by these factories and these because it was a hub. It was a railroad hub.
Yeah, but I hope that project goes through now. But anyway, I take my hat off to you for that, and that you were doing it. And I also understand we're getting up almost to the 60s now, right? And that we have a mutual friend in Lucy Commissar.
We sure do.
Lucy Commissar is one of my favorite human beings.
Yeah.
And I'm so pleased. I have many. Lucy's wonderful. But
Lucy does things that scare the hell out of me.
Well, she does wonders. She's a real scholar. And she's a real doer and so forth. And I was very happy to see front page of the New York Times and Mr. Obama now, who I want to have great faith in and so forth, has going to, among other things, he's going to be seriously, apparently, closing the overseas banking places where they can stash and get out of tax obligations, what do they call them, tax havens.
Yeah.
That's being done, like Cayman Islands and
but she's
Isle of
never
Man.
Gotten the credit.
And she's written on that better than anybody else that I know of, how much that has violated the integrity of the country. And it's going to be a big thing that the bankers of the world who can hide money and get a quarter-point advantage or something by playing that game is going to be one thing that's going to really stick in their craw if he sticks to that. Because that's a very important thing, and she's exposed that better than anybody else.
She really has.
And she was in 1962 down in Mississippi.
I know, she
editing
was there
a
right
newspaper.
after me.
And I take my hat off to those early pioneers who went down there and started that thing that culminated with Martin King and Malcolm X and the Voting Rights Act and all of that stuff that was so major. And I take my hat off to you, dear, because apparently you were there. And what prompted you?
I was in the same job right before her, but...
Okay, but I'm
but
running ahead.
I was only there for 2 weeks. It's okay. I was only in that job for about a week.
In total?
Well, they told me to come down.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that they had given the job to somebody else. A friend of his had come down. Charlie's friend had come down.
Who's Charlie?
I'm trying to remember Charlie Butts.
Okay.
So he was running the newspaper, and he had said, sure, come, and I showed up, and he said, oh, but, my friend here has the job. And then when the friend left, Lucy took the job.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I had gone over to work for SNCC.
Okay. Oh, SNCC. With Stokely or not? With Stokely Carmichael?
Well, yeah. Sure.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. How did you get to where you did that? You're in St. Louis, you're in the Bronx, you're in the North, you got a degree, you're doing your stuff. How did you get the gumption or the thing? What led you to have the thing to take the risks that are involved for going into that very, very angry environment at such an early stage? What had gotten you to that point? What were the steps that got you?
I think it was the picture of that little girl going into the school with the crowds around her.
Right.
Yeah.
In Little Rock or no?
No, she was in New Orleans.
New Orleans. Okay, I don't remember that. Yeah.
The Ruby. I'm not sure if it's Ruby. It wasn't Ruby Bridges. It was Ruby something else. Anyway, the Catholic schools integrated.
Okay.
And there were crowds outside screaming. Yeah. And she had to be escorted by soldiers, by armed people.
Yeah. But you had been interested in those things when you were 9.
I had always intended.
Yeah. Your sentiment was all in the right direction, and your resentment to the accepted system.
When I left home, I had been working at a hotel and television channel doing public relations, and when I left home to come to New York, thinking that there was more opportunity when there was actually more opportunity in St. Louis. Okay. Then I was able to get active. I couldn't be active in St. Louis at the time because I was scared of my parents.
You were scared of your parents?
Well, I was scared of my stepfather.
You were scared of your stepfather? I don't understand.
He had a terrible temper.
He had a temper?
Yeah.
You're talking being a young woman then?
Yeah, I just...
At home?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like confrontation. I do like confrontation. I do it, but... I just didn't want a whole family row.
And he was prejudiced?
He was actually pretty
talking
good
on the civil rights thing now.
For him, yeah. They later disowned me when I was in 63. Yeah.
Because they thought you were just a...
Well, when I got arrested and he didn't want his name, he wanted me to change his name, my name.
Because he was what would be the word, opposite of proud. He was
he
ashamed
was
by what
terribly
you were
ashamed,
doing.
yeah.
That kind of thing.
Well, yeah.
Isn't that something? Yeah, I know. I had the same thing, except it didn't get to that. My mother was a Republican.
Mm-hmm. Well, so was he.
And I got arrested many a time and so forth for being on the barricades and that kind of stuff. And she used to get concerned. It didn't concern me at all, except how the hell do you get out of jail? But I know what you mean. But it wasn't like that. She was just, it's a tide over from the old times, you know, people that are imbued with beliefs. And we got that problem all along, how we're going to make adjustments. But I take my hat off to you for being involved in that so early on. And how much involvement did you have in the broader civil rights movement in the South then?
Oh, really? Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
We can go on from, you got involved with Stokely.
Well, I was never personally involved with Stokely. No, yes.
No, but we
were good friends, yeah.
Yeah, I was a good friend with him. I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
He was so funny.
Yes.
I really, what do you call it, lament his passing.
Yeah.
You know? He was funny. He's smart as a whip, really good. And he was down there early on.
Got me into situations sometimes, and I'd think...
Led you astray, did he?
Oh, my... Yeah, you know, there are gaps in your knowledge, and one time we went to sit in Bobby Kennedy's office, and we walked through the Justice Department, and I thought, I didn't realize that the FBI was here.
And there
were all the FBI people coming out of their offices and looking at us.
They all seem to be very big.
No, I was just thinking about that the other day because here we have cell phones, we have everything.
Yeah, right.
And at the time, Frank Nelson was sitting outside this sit-in at Bobby Kennedy's office with pockets full of nickels
to make the phone.
To make a phone call in case we got into any kind of real trouble.
Yeah, good there's those people around who make sure you get the bail fund.
I mean, just the idea that, you know, like any phone call we made was being listened to, you know, in the South.
Well, that's
the
case now.
Yeah, but
I think they're listening to everything at Echelon or in
you know,
Langley.
they weren't doing it by plugging into the switchboard.
Yeah, no, they were.
And listening.
And the things that Mr. Hoover did to Mr. King, he just bugged his phone and everything.
He did it to everybody.
And that whole thing, and people maybe don't realize what a huge transformation that was. And there was that awful reaction, the people down south particularly, and their fellow travelers in the north also. There was segregation and things, and injustice going on all the time.
There's a book that came out that said that Hoover was, in fact, a man of color himself.
Really?
And he wanted to hide it. Yeah, it was a cousin of his. Said, yes, she had known him when he was little. And
but you were imbued with that sense of the desire for an activist in terms of trying to bring about social justice. Well, good for you. I think that's a good thing to dedicate your life to, and you've been involved in that, and I really congratulate you enormously on that. That was a major transformative thing. I presume you were against the war in Vietnam?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, very happy when Martin King gave that talk?
Oh, well, yeah.
He gave a talk against it.
We were all, you know.
Yeah, he finally came out.
I mean, Julian Bond didn't get seated because he was against the war, you know, and everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody suffered.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't get seated in the Georgia.
It was a horrible thing. Yeah. It was horrible. And then you had Woodstock and that whole thing. That era.
Oh, that was later.
Was well, that was 68, 69.
Yeah, it's like that.
But the Voting Rights Act, a lot of stuff didn't come, you know, it came 64, 65. It was a major moment of transition that the nation came and now have accepted the idea of giant transformation of an appropriate way for the society to be organized and that sort of thing. And then there's this other issue that apparently you've been involved in because we've had this institution, this republic since 1776, and the women haven't had a vote.
Until what, 20?
It's hard to imagine. Until 1920, the women couldn't. You know, in Switzerland, they didn't get the right to vote until it's set 1976 or something like that. Yeah. Now, how in the world have we been able to live in a world, the Stanton and all that notwithstanding, for so long, that the women didn't have a right to vote. I mean, that is absurd, is it not, in the face of it?
Yeah.
And you were railing against that, I presume, as well.
I mean, there were theologians who said that women didn't have souls. There were a lot of them.
Right.
So,
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, women, dogs, cats.
It's ridiculous. And they say everything's gone to hell since 19... Maybe we should take... some people want to go back in time, get rid of the get rid of the... Civil Rights Act or something, get rid of voting, take the voting away from women, because everything's been messed up since then. They got prejudice that is deep-seated, and that's what you're fighting against, really, that kind of thing. But you were the first one, in another vein, to come upon the use of the honorific Ms., and there's been a whole kettle of fish around that, so maybe you can share that.
The story is that my roommate Mary was speaking at News and Letters in Detroit.
Okay.
And she got their newsletter.
Okay.
And it came addressed to MS Mary Hamilton. And
by mistake, somebody had done a
well,
mistype
that's
or
what
typo?
I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, and it turns out...
When are we talking now?
We're talking 61.
61, early then, okay, yeah.
So I thought the circumstances of my birth were that my father didn't marry my mother. So I didn't belong to him, I didn't belong to my stepfather, I didn't want to get married, and I thought, what is all this? I'm known as Miss or Mrs., and people keep asking you whether you're Miss or Mrs., and I was, let's see, 61, I was 22 already. That was, the average age of marriage for women was 18 at that point.
Yeah, I guess so.
It was.
Probably over the longer haul, the younger even, but anyway,
No, well, in the end of the 50s, in the end of the 50s, it was 18.
Okay.
Which means a lot of people were marrying at 14. So I was looking for something that didn't identify me and anybody who wanted to use that. And I saw this, Ms., and I thought that could be a title. And
61.
61.
Good for you.
And our next door neighbor was known as Ms. Noble, and she was already a widow then. So I never...
She was known as that.
She was known as Ms. Noble, yeah.
Ms. Noble.
So I didn't know if she
that wasn't just
had
an
ever been
abbreviation
married.
Of Ms.
No, she was. That was what people
Ms.
were
Noble.
called. Ms.
Okay.
Noble.
Yeah, right.
So I didn't know if she was a widow, which she was, or a Miss or a Mrs. I just didn't know. And when I was younger, I was curious about that. And she was always, she had terrarium. She was kind of terrific. So anyway, immediately I thought of her. I thought that would work. That would be Ms.
Yeah, yeah.
Ms.
You caught on to it right away.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I realized it when I was in Korea in 77, and there was a boutique, Ms. Boutique, and I thought, wow. And I've been anonymous, but it just, I was so happy.
Yeah.
I was so...
When you came to that idea of using Ms., right?
Yeah, and I tried to get people to listen. No one would listen. And then when we founded the women's movement, nobody would listen. Really, I would think that this would be an idea that would appeal to women. And
where did it take? Gloria Steinem became a publisher of Ms. and everything, and it really took off.
Well,
as part of the feminist movement. That's another social justice movement you've been deeply involved in.
I was on a radio show with a group called The Feminists, and we were all anonymous except for T. Grace Atkinson, who everybody knew anyway. So, but anyway, we were on the show, and there was a lull in the conversation, and I brought up my hobby horse, of Ms. Yeah, because nobody had anything to say, and then they had something to say. So when I went back to get a tape of that, it had been erased for some guy's music show, and they were laughing.
Oh, they erased over it.
Sure, women's stuff. God, this will only last 2 weeks.
We used to have to do that when we had television early. You'd race over a program. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, anyway, that was a friend of hers heard it, and when they were trying to think of a title for this magazine that they were starting from, it was an offshoot of New York Magazine.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
The Ms., right?
Yeah, it was during the strike.
Was that
it was during
Gloria
the newspaper
Steinem?
strike. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So she was, I guess, with New York Magazine.
And by then the feminist thing was getting real clout, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have clout, but we were making a lot of noise.
Making
at the
a lot
time.
of noise, yeah.
And making people think, I hope.
And you were thinking along those lines too. You were a feminist.
Oh, I was waiting for it.
You were waiting for it.
It was something that I was in Turkey when they had the Miss America pageant.
You got something that is turkey, don't you? Or did you bring something in that was turkey?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can do it. We'll have to make sure we can get the. And we got a book. This is some of the stuff from the Faces of Freedom.
Faces
summer.
of Freedom summer.
That would have been.
Oh yeah, here's a picture of me when I was in Turkey.
See. Where do we hang this, or where do we hold this up? I'll hold it up maybe to this camera. You might be able to come into it. It's MTTB, and it's something. They'll have to come in on it, or show me where can I put it. This one is not. You're not robotic there, are you? I don't think that's robotic. You can't come in on it. And let me try it over here. And can you come in on my camera or the camera that's on her? Or wait. Okay, there you go. Okay, good.
That
Center
was how I looked at the beginning of the women's movement.
And get it in focus and get it in tight. And this is from Turkey. What year would this have been, dear?
That was 1968.
68, that memorable year.
Yeah, and I thought that the movement, I thought that it had started without me.
And what were you doing in Turkey?
I was well, I went to take a course in archaeology at Hebrew University, and I didn't really like Israel, and I wanted to get, at the end of the semester, it was a summer semester course, and every plane to Athens was full, so I went to Turkey, and I loved it. Oh my God, I loved Turkey. Turkey loved me.
Oh, right. You spent some time there.
No, just a few weeks, just about 3 weeks or so.
So Ms. was something that would be like Mr. So you didn't have the Ms., Miss, and Mrs. that you had on the female side.
Because they're both from mistress. Mistress and master. And you have master for little boys, but nobody uses it anymore.
My grandfather was from England, and he used to always refer to us as master.
Yes.
The same way you would say Ms., Miss. So there they had Mr. was if you were an adult and married, and master was a term they used all the time routinely for a young man. Yeah. So why didn't we bring back the word master for the young boys and keep Miss and Mrs. in order to make the distinction of who and who's not married, or is there an issue
Well, you
in
don't need to, because they didn't. I mean, Fielding referred to every grown woman as Mrs. And that was one of the things that I was thinking of. Why would you make I mean, mistress and miss are both abbreviations.
Mistress is different than miss.
Miss and Mrs. are both abbreviations of mistress.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Why would it be? You think of MRS was a thing that would be some woman who is married.
Yes, but
mistress is somebody who's not necessarily married but is involved in a liaison with a gentleman, right? So that's different. I don't know that we have an honorific like that for a gentleman who's involved with a lady.
Isn't that
isn't it
strange?
It gets into interesting things. But my grandfather used to address the things Master Harold Channer, who was always master, routinely, just like Miss. But congratulations on calling that to attention, finally getting us, into bringing some sort of equality into the gender business and all that. Because, I mean, that's been an important development that's still maturing and still developing, and I guess things are getting improved. We got a lot of things to do. One of the problems with this program is we only have an hour, and you have a whole life, and it's very interesting, and there's too much we can go into. And you mentioned you were in Turkey, okay?
Yeah.
And you do have down as something biblical. I heard you say you went to the Hebrew University. So why don't we talk a little bit about your biblical scholarship and also your interest in the Middle East and things biblical in your autodidactic development of your understanding of the world and your educational process that you were was attendant upon you following all those interests that you had.
Yeah, that came out of my interest in mythology.
Okay.
And the first time at Columbia, when I had to read the Bible, I thought, oh my God, this is a gold mine, you know.
Yeah.
And I've followed it ever since.
Okay. From the time you were relatively young then?
No, actually, it was 1980. I was already close. I was already about 40.
I had missed it that you were doing your studies at Columbia after you had done a lot of other things.
Did some, and then I went
so
back.
You weren't through with
university
at 25 years old, like, or 24, like everybody. You were strung out a formal education.
And by the time I got by the time it was 1980, I was already doing graduate studies in Middle Eastern studies.
Right.
And I fell into that.
You did that graduate at Columbia?
I was interested in. Somebody offered a class on Zoroastrianism, Zoroastrian mythology.
Right.
And I took it, and that was how I got into sort of Persian studies. But I did not finish with this. I did not go very far with it.
But again, we were back talking.
I mean, I never learned Persian.
No. Okay. But no, we weren't necessarily looking at it. But you were really interested in it.
Oh yeah.
So we could put down biblical. You're very interested in that,
well,
and you've taught yourself.
This conference that's coming up in New Orleans in November, which is 2 consecutive conferences: the American Schools of Oriental Research, and then the next conference is the Society of Biblical Literature, and they're both the largest of their kind.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about 5,000 people go to the Society of Biblical Literature. So I'm giving 3 papers there this year.
Are you really?
Yes.
Okay. And is it going to be about Persia or?
Well, no.
Okay.
The ones at ASOR at American Schools, it's I'm going to be talking about Rachel and the Teraphim.
I don't know.
Okay. It's in Genesis. Okay. And she steals these gods of her father, and I'm saying that they've been looking for the wrong precedents. I'm saying, for one thing, that they should have been looking at other Middle Eastern stories, and instead they've been looking for property markers in another area.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the result of your research, and you're following it.
Yeah.
Do you use the internet a lot to do research now, or not?
I do.
Okay. I think it's wonderful.
And the thing is
and it's getting better all the time.
Google Books, you know, if you can't find your book, you know it's in there somewhere. It's in there somewhere. You can find usually what you want. You cannot you have to take notes by hand.
Yeah.
But most of the books that you want are online already.
I know. Isn't it wonderful?
Oh, it's marvelous.
And we did mention earlier how the leading scholars at Harvard are putting their lectures online. So you're going to be able to, it's a dream. We used to have the Encyclopedia Britannica.
I remember, yeah.
And the
I
Harvard
have the
Classics
1903
next to the mantelpiece,
edition.
you know, and that. And they had the Harvard Classics and that, books. But now everything's available to us increasingly. We just talked with Barbara Rosenfeld about what's coming in with the computers now, and it's just moving to where information is becoming available to anybody in every field. It's wonderful.
Well, I have the whole 1903 Encyclopedia
Do you
Britannica.
really?
Yes, but the thing is that I always feel that the Wi-Fi could go down, anything could happen, and I should keep my books. You know.
Oh, I like books.
Yeah.
I have it's an emotional thing because we were raised with them. And we didn't have the computer and everything. You said a couple things sort of in passing and everything. You said you were at the Hebrew University and you didn't like Israel. And then also, I would like to pursue that a little bit. I shouldn't. What? No.
I'm a Zionist, but
you
know,
are a Zionist?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can talk to that. It's a big issue now. We got this new thing going. We can talk to
I just don't happen to want to be there.
Okay. Well, okay. We don't want to make Aliyah. You're Jewish?
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to make Aliyah. Okay. But then you also, interesting to me, you said you had an interest in Zoroastrianism and Persia, and that's Iran, and that's interesting. How did you happen to get that in? Did the interest in Zoroastrianism come from your interest in mythology, or how did it? And biblical scholar you are. Maybe you could flesh some of those things out a little bit.
Well, I sort of started to become a biblical scholar about the same time I became interested in the Zoroastrian mythology. I mean, they were actually, I took the biblical course the next year, I mean the next semester. But I was interested in mythology. The Zoroastrian course was being offered with a visiting scholar from Israel.
Was that at Columbia?
That was at Columbia.
At Columbia, okay.
And so I took the course,
Right.
and I became terribly interested in it. It's fascinating stuff.
Right,
It's great stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was taught by Shaked, and then it was taught by Yar Shater. And a number of wonderful scholars in Persian studies are Jewish. Anyway.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Israeli and Jewish. And Jewish Iranian people. So
well, there were an awful lot of Jews came from Baghdad too.
Yeah,
I mean, back in the old days.
Yeah.
That was a Babylonian.
Almost more than half of your Indian community is actually Baghdadi originally. Yeah,
the
Indian Jewish community. Yeah.
You mean in the country of India?
Yeah.
Okay. India.
I mean, they trace themselves back to 500 BCE, but in fact, most of them are people who migrated from Baghdad.
Right. Okay.
The Sassoons and people like that.
Yeah, but Iran also and Zora. And they had a thing, did you ever run into a thing called Mithra?
Yeah.
Or Mithraism?
Yeah, Mithraism.
Where does that fit in? And I've had some things saying that it's pre-Zoroastrian.
It might be.
And it goes back to Ur. And it goes back a long time. And that there's a fellow who said that they had in Rome, it was Constantine. No, pre-Constantine.
Yeah.
There was the Vatican Hill was a temple to Mithra.
Yeah.
And Mithra was widely worshipped among Romans
soldiers
and so forth, pre-Christian and so
it
forth.
Was a
and
military,
Mithra was a major
development.
Cult. Some people claim it was the earliest monotheistic expression of religion.
No.
That it went pre-Abraham, Mithraism, and that there were a lot of analogies with, and that it's a major thing. And then Zoroastrianism.
It was a major influence, and it was the cult that the army followed, the Roman army followed.
Yeah,
so they brought it to Britain. They brought it everywhere.
When does it go back? There was a person, Mithra. There, apparently, from what I've been able to find on the web and everything, and it did exist, and it was based upon that. It was sort of like, what do you know about that, or what do you think about it? You've studied
I don't really know Mithraism.
Okay.
I mean, I know fire temples in Armenia. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, right. But it is interesting, and it's very important, because that's a very important part of the world. Have you gone to, a little bit spell out, you said you were at the Hebrew University, and you did a throwaway line, is you don't want to go to Israel, but what did you study there at the Hebrew University? Did you live there for a while?
Oh, no. I just took that 1 6-week course.
I see. Okay.
And what happened was, it was just, as soon as people found out I didn't want to make Aliyah, they lost interest in me.
The Israelis, you mean? The societal people?
Yeah, and all the friends that I made were Palestinians.
And that's interesting. I just did a program with a fellow who was a Babylonian Jew from Iraq, and he claims that he went there, and then it would be like Sephardim, and that it was Ashkenazi based, and that he was treated badly and not given an opportunity, and it's like an apartheid between the Ashkenazi and the Sephardim, and particularly with the Babylonian Iraqi Jews, and he has now become anti-Zionist.
I would say that it was probably more like being Italian at the beginning of this century, of this last century, that it was very hard to be accepted in America.
Right.
Or being Jewish at the beginning of the 20th century,
maybe.
being Latino now. That yes, there's a big problem there, and it's not me, so I can say it's not as bad as he sees it. But
as he did.
I mean, actually, my father was Sephardic, but
Okay, well, that's an interesting issue, because now we got this fellow Lieberman over there. I don't know what to make of him and that and what's going on. I think there's real trouble over there, maybe, but I don't want to go into that.
Yeah. No.
But I mean, it's just interesting. You've spent some time. Did you spend time in Iran or in Persia?
I never got there.
Never got there.
No, the revolution happened just about the time that I became interested in.
Yeah.
Persian studies.
But you've had a wide-ranging interest in everything, and you've got this very strong sense of justice and everything, and I congratulate you on that, and thank you for bringing us Ms.
Oh.
I think it's made us a far better world, don't you, you know?
I hope so.
In the words of Ronald Coleman.
I hope so. Yeah.
And you've been doing that. So now, here we are, 2009, and you're still keeping your interest in the issues of social justice and justice on a world scale. There's a lot of challenge there and so forth. And also the biblical interest in mythic research and that sort of thing. You're still keeping your hand in and all of that now. I understand you just had a birthday.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Oh, you're going to be 35 finally.
I'm going to be 70.
There is life after 35, I'm sure to assure you.
I'm going to be 70.
I know, you're a young chicken. 70. That's young. That's
I'm
nothing.
So happy I made it this far. I'm just so happy. I'm telling everybody. I'm telling the world.
Septuagenarian.
70.
Congratulations on the alternative. That's really good.
God.
Well, we're a far better world having you here. You've done such good work and all that. And making Ms. a major thing is great. And then being down there early with SNCC and all that, I really congratulate you on it. What's engaging you mostly now? I mean, now, are you still keeping, all of those are still front and center to you?
Well, it's the biblical studies. I'm doing oral histories still. I haven't actually been I have problems with equipment. And
you mean making technology work?
I mean equipment breaking down in the middle of...
Tell me about it. It happens all the time.
Susan Brown Miller said, you know, don't worry, I've lost so many interviews, you know.
Yeah.
But, No,
just in general. Yeah, I have the same thing.
Yeah.
Are you adept with the computer?
Well, I can do it now on my
computer.
I know that I can do the interviews on the computer, and I'm going to go down to Washington sometime this year. Actually, I'm kind of grounded because of my former husband being so ill right now.
I'm sorry. We didn't talk about that.
No, there's nothing to talk about.
No, but you were married along the line then.
I was married to a man whose English is... His English is not his first language. Japanese is his first language.
Really?
So all of his ex-wives are helping him as much as they can.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, he's come upon illness, right?
Yeah, he's got 4th stage colon cancer.
Oh, dear me. I'm sorry.
So, yeah.
I'm very sorry for that.
It's hard.
Yeah, that's hard. He's scholarly man, is he?
No, he's a chef.
A chef.
I like to eat, yeah.
Is he good?
He was good, yeah.
Chef.
He can't now because you can't touch anything cold when you're getting chemotherapy.
I see, yeah. Right, I'm sorry. That's a tough thing.
Yeah.
All the best, of course, yeah. Well, I understand that. But you've got all these things that have built up, and you've got such interesting stories to tell. And that, any stories from those stories? Any more stories with Stokely down in there? Other fine mess Stokely got you into down there? Another barricade you got me on, Stokely, or something? You got any more stories from that?
No, he was just a very good friend.
Oh, he's great. Yeah. And funny. Did you remember him as being really funny? I remember as having the best sense. We used to laugh our heads off.
He would stand in our kitchen, and if everybody was gone, he would talk to the cat. He just kept going. You know?
Right. He just went
and we were partying, and Stokely never came in to dance. You know, he would stay in the kitchen and talk to his circle of friends, you know.
And talk them out. But he was funny.
Yeah, he was.
We used to clown around,
and
he had me in stitches.
Yeah.
We used to talk, we met a lot in Libya, because I like Muammar Gaddafi a lot. I think he's ahead of the world and everything, and they had conferences you have when he was a terrorist supposedly or something, and they'd be smuggling people in by the back window because they had what do you call it, sanctions, or you're not supposed to go or something. And so they would call these conferences, and we'd go to these conferences. It was great. It was like all the pirates would gather at this conference, and they were all...
This is wonderful.
Oh, yeah. About 10 times we did that. And Stokely would be there. He started living in Guinea, right?
Yeah.
And he was also very much of a... He took the name Kwame Ture from Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Toure. and he was a Pan-Africanist. And that movement is getting a lot of movement now. Have you been following things in Africa?
No, because Pan-Africanism I think of as being from the 1920s and 40s.
You do, really? What do you mean by that? What do you think?
Well, it started...
Kwame Nkrumah was doing that in Ghana.
And W.E.B. Du Bois was a Pan-Africanist. And Richard Wright wrote a book called Black Power. He wrote about Pan-Africanism.
Did he really? Okay. Yeah.
And Julian Bond's father, Horace Mann Bond, was he was the head of Lincoln University, and the board got rid of him, or they hounded him because he was into negritude. He was in the negritude movement, which was in Africa and based at the time. Senegal.
Senegal's over in the west there and everything like that. There's a thing, well, that's interesting to me because they're now, and that's where we'd meet, and then we would have these talks. And there was some guy wanted to have a. Anyway, we had just great time.
He was brilliant.
I loved him. I loved him dearly. He was a wonderful guy. I just remember him being so laughed.
And
we were laughing.
Saying,
but he was so serious too.
What's the position of women? And he said prone. He could never pass up a joke. It was the oldest joke in the world. And people keep bringing it up, and I keep saying no, no. He was fairer than most people I knew.
He had the greatest sense of that, but he had this great sense of humor. Thank God for that. But there's a serious thing going on.
And he loved strong women.
Oh, well, okay, Miriam McCabe,
Well, and you should have met Mary Lovelace O'Neill.
Okay, I didn't know. Okay, but anyway, that's happening now, and now they've got this Arab Chamber of Commerce now of the United States is here. They're important people, and now you've got this movement going from Gaddafi, and they've got the African Union, and he's proclaiming, and they've got the thing in order. They got the thing, and I've been reading from the thing. They got people, heads of state, saying congratulations. They're going to try and start the United States of Africa. It's going to be an Addis, and they're going to have the United States of Africa like the European Union in Africa.
You're the first person I've ever met who liked Gaddafi.
Oh, I think he's ahead of the curve historically. Yeah, I think he's a real leader in terms of the historical development of the planet. And Kwame and I used to agree on that, and why, but that's a whole other program. Yeah, I think he's got it. He's about ahead of the world the same way the United States was ahead of feudal Europe when they came up with the idea of a republic rather than feudalism. Yeah, the system we have in place has to be replaced by something the future requires. He's got the state organized from the ground in a way that is in keeping with what the future requires, and the world's going to get lessons from, in my view. Now he's getting, he's now got a recognition now. And they got over that. He didn't do Lockerbie, and he got recognition in the world. And he's also the leader of Pakistan, the current one. He may be replaced recently, but on a Pan-Arab front. You got Pan-Arab, and he's got Pan-Africa. So he's a major person to keep on the lookout for. He's getting older now, but he's still got the really